Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein, longtime journalist and a mom of three, navigating the highs and lows of parenting too. Each week, we talk about the things we're experiencing and then go to the experts for guidance on those topics. And this is one I'm actually in the thick of right now with both a teen and tween at home. We're talking about that changing relationship when your child moves into those years, how to best approach these changing times, and why it is completely normal to feel sad and even mourn the relationship that once was. You know, the cuddles, the sweetness, the hand-holding, all those heart-filling things that now might be, can you turn the music off before I get out of the car? Hanging in their room or with friends instead of you, and of course, the back talk, the attitude that can really sting even if we don't always show it. And the idea for this particular conversation came from a mom on the soccer sidelines. We were watching our 11 and 12-year-olds play soccer while my 5-year-old was right at my feet, handing me bouquets of dandelions. And then she asked, does he, as in my little one, keep you going? I asked what she meant. And then we just had this really honest conversation about, kind of mourning the relationship with our boys who are now officially preteens, too cool for cuddles. That sweetness, might have turned a little sour, you might say. And today we are lucky enough to have Ayanna Allen. She is a certified parenting coach. Her studies are in human development. Her business is Go Hard Parenting. She is such a cool and knowledgeable lady. I'll just start with that. But she's also in the thick of all of this and experiencing these things too with her own daughter. This is a conversation that's eye-opening and will likely leave you reflecting on your own experience and your relationships with your kids. Here's our conversation. Ayanna, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation today. Listen, I'm just going to start right out with this because when I heard it, you're a parenting coach, I was like, well, first of all, sign me up for the team. But what exactly is a parenting coach? How did you get into this?
Parenting coach is, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not a therapist. A parenting coach is technically, they could have a therapist or a therapy background, um, but a coach is more of a supporter. So I affectionately call myself a mama supporter, a parent supporter. Coach is someone that's going to help you discover your resilience in parenting and activate some skills that maybe you had and didn't know, or just some new skills that you weren't aware of. So that's in a nutshell, what a parent
Guidance.
coach is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
guidance. It's
Yeah.
guidance. And just, emotional, mental support, especially for now, parents are very, the country is like you have your grandparents are on one side of the country, or you have the families are so much more spread out. And then also parenting is changing. The way we look and talk about parenting is different from what our parents did. And so we don't always feel like we have a comfortable or a space to talk about some of the things that we don't want to do that were done during our childhood. So who do you talk to about that? You talk to your parents, they're going to go to their antiquated ways of parenting. And it's like, you don't necessarily want to do that. So who can you talk to? So that a parenting coach is good for that too.
Well, right. I mean, to that point, we are sort of the first generation of parents raising kids in the social media age. So it's not something that other generations can really relate to. So how did you get into being a parenting coach? Why are you so passionate about this?
So great question. So, I have a 14-year-old. When I was pregnant with her, that was like, I'm going to be super intentional. So quick story. My mother did not raise me. She wasn't in my life. She passed away when I was 17. And so I had a very disconnected relationship with a mother, with a woman in my life. And so that really took me on my own journey of really a lot of self-doubt. That self-doubt turned into curiosity. And that turned into like me really watching how other women move through life.
Mm.
And I had been doing that all along. And then as, becoming a mother, I was like curious. I was asking other moms or other daughters, that had relationships, good relationships with their mothers, like, what did she do? It turned into a very curious thing. And then but it still wasn't super like, I didn't get research based until my second daughter. So when I had my second daughter, a very close friend of mine, who her and I were pregnant at the same time, we had all these questions. We were already into a very growth mindset, just
Mm.
as a person, as a human being, and we wanted to know, like, okay, what things can we apply to our children? So when we had our second babies, we started a moms group to have these discussions. So we were reading a lot of books, but we were reading these books that were very socially and science based on like brain development and emotional intelligence and all these things. And we were finding some real gold. So we said, we should really have a mothers group because we're suffering out here, we're struggling. And finally, we feel like we're the first generation that has the bandwidth to consider parenting in a conscious way. Whereas our parents and their parents were very much in survival mode.
Mm.
Whereas with us, we may still be surviving, but we also have some buckets where we're thriving, and so we can invest. We this is an opportunity. I feel like this generation is really a shift changer. Like this is the generation where we can really shift generational patterns. And so we started a moms group, and that was in 2019. And then we did that, and then COVID happened. And so the group kind of dwindled off. It got on Zoom, and then, it just kind of dwindled away. But I was still very much on fire about all the things I was learning, practicing, still learning, my own journey. And so then I decided to go for a certification for a parent coach because I found that that's actually a thing. It's like, oh, there's a thing for this. So then I went and I got certified. And here we are. I've been just like super passionate about supporting parents.
A couple of things come to mind, but one in particular is that, I'm Gen X. I think everybody comes from a family where, you explained you didn't have a mom in your life, but everybody has something. And it feels like we're a generation of parents where we're acknowledging that and not burying it deeper and then
That's right.
passing on, some trauma, frankly, to our kids. It's much more out in the open. Like we're giving words to it. We're
That's
speaking
right.
to it.
That's right. Yeah, we're acknowledging it, which is the first step to growth.
It
Can't grow if
is.
you don't acknowledge.
And speaking of growth, because this is, we kind of digress there a little bit, but because this is the topic that I was really excited to talk to you about. And you have written a blog recently about kids' growth from, a child into their teenage years and kind of feeling a sense of mourning. And it really put words to it. It was coincidentally about a week or so before we connected. I was talking to a fellow mom on the soccer field, and she had said to me, she looked at our youngest, who was like at my leg and picking dandelions and handing them up to me, like really sweet, and saying, "Does he keep you going?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, I feel sad sometimes that my youngest is now 12. And,
Mhm.
I don't feel that like warm, cuddly, sweet, the world is so wonderful that you get from 4, 5, 6 year olds still. She said, it feels like a mourning period. And I was like, yeah, because that's kind of what I'm experiencing with my almost 12-year-old right now, who, barely wants to hang out and that kind of thing. So tell me about your experience with that and what you're talking to other parents about when it comes to that, sense of loss, really.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm certainly in the thick of it now. At least it feels like I'm in the thick of it. I have some time. I have a 14-year-old, so we got a few more years
Mhm.
of teenage life. Um, there's definitely a sense of grief. There's definitely a sense of mourning, as you know. So in the blog, I talk about my personal experience, and I'll tell you right now, I started to notice, and I think it depends on the child and their developmental stages, and just their life experience. But I noticed that my daughter and I started to really drift away when she was about 10.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm like, what's happening? Because one thing I will say, and I talked about this in the blog, is that when I found out I was having a girl, this is my first baby, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're having a girl, it's so exciting!" But be careful because when she's a teenager, oh, it's going to be terrible. And I'm like, I'm not subscribing to that. That's not going to be my reality. But I also was like, okay, what can I do to just not make that my
Yeah.
reality? And so when I started to experience some disconnection when she turned 10, I was in like repair mode. I'm like, what do I have to do? Like, what can I do? And one of the things that I am so glad that I had the space to do um, is when COVID happened, I started working from home, and I said, I'm going to use this opportunity to homeschool.
Hmm.
And I'd always wanted to homeschool because I have, opinions about public school systems, but I just always was telling myself, like, I can't, I work full time, I can't do it. And so being able to work from home, I decided that, I was going to do that. I have a friend who she's homeschooled. She has 5 children now. And so she's a pro. And so she was like, she was my coach. She was supporting. She's like, you can do this, you can do this. And so I bring that up because I use that space, not because she was struggling academically. She's actually very strong academically. So, and socially too in school, that was not a problem, but I really was disconnected from her. She was in
Mhm.
school all day. I was at work all day. I would see her during dinner, bath, and then on the weekends. And I just didn't want that. That clearly was a disconnect. That was breaking points for us. And so I was able to spend a lot more time with her while I homeschooled her. And more importantly, she was able to spend a lot more time with herself. And she was able to really not be distracted by peer influence at that age.
Mhm.
And I was selective. Like she was still social, but I was more I was able to be more mama bear at that age and say, okay, so these are people we're going to be hanging out with, as opposed to just her being in school. Now, obviously, this is not an option for everyone, but this helped me repair the connection that I had lost.
When you say though that you felt disconnected starting at about the age of 10, and I feel what you're saying there. Like, what was it for you? Like, what were the things that felt disconnected? Was it that you just weren't having the same kind of conversations? The hand holding or the cuddling on the
Yeah,
couch watching a
yeah,
movie kind of,
yeah,
physical touch or,
yeah.
because it's probably different for everybody, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah. Well, a
Yeah.
couple things had happened. I was newly married. I had a baby. She wasn't the only child anymore. She certainly
Yeah.
wasn't the youngest. She was old enough to be independent and do things on her own. So I think that I left her to that. She's always been like a kind
Mhm.
of a little bit more mature in terms of her thinking. And so sometimes I think that's dangerous because as parents, we kind of rely on that. And they
Yes.
were like, oh, they're fine, but they still need us. They're still our babies. And so, having a new baby, I think that that played a part because a lot of my attention was, especially because she was self sufficient, or at least externally, it looked that way, right? And so that kind of became a thing. And then also hormones. This is when the hormones start kicking in. And it wasn't so much that she didn't want to spend time with me at 10, it was that we weren't spending the time.
Mm.
So if the only time that we were spending it together was me telling her what to do, like, could you imagine being in a relationship where that the only time you really have meaningful interaction is when someone is telling you what to do? They're giving you directives, or they're telling you how to do something better. And of course, from the parent's perspective, it's well-meaning. We want our kids to grow and be better. But from the child's perspective, you're not seeing them. You don't see them. You're not
Yeah.
acknowledging their realities. You're not, and so I think a lot of that is what started. It wasn't severe, but when I noticed the signs, I was in a position where I could act on them, and that's when I started to really act on them. And again, I'd been reading books and things like that, so I was practicing, I was experimenting, really.
For the average parent, what can we do to make those kind of repairs if we realize, wait, look, we have been, every exchange is, hey, did you unload the dishwasher? Hey, pick up your backpack. Hey, did you make your lunch yet?
Yeah,
And that you're right. That is a large part of parenting at that age because, I have found that sometimes that age they're also quite forgetful. Um, but what are some of the things that we can do as parents so we don't get into that sort of naggingness,
Yeah,
and
sure.
that's what our relationship with our tween or our teen becomes.
Yeah. So there's a few things that we can do. And when I talk to parents and when I talk to myself, I am really on, look, the only thing that we truly can control is ourselves. And sometimes we can't even we're so, a lot of the things that we do are subconscious anyway, so I don't even know if we can fully control those parts of ourselves, but we can control ourselves. So the most important thing in parenting is self-ownership. You
Mm,
have to have ownership. So if you find that you are quick to correct, to direct, to criticize, and all of those things on this, you could tell yourself, oh, I just want them to be better. But really, a lot of times, you want yourself to be better. You're judging yourself. And if you are judging your children, it's because you're judging yourself. So that's one thing. You really want to get to the meat of it. And the root of it is what areas are you not giving yourself grace?
mm,
And then once you can address where you're giving yourself grace, then you can actually extend that grace to other people, and in this instance, your children. So that's one thing. Another thing is really being clear on your values as a parent. What is most important? Because you can't do everything. And my stance is connection is the most important thing that you can have with your child. That is what's going to have lasting impact in a positive way for your relationship with your child and for the relationship that your child has with him or herself. They have to have that connection. So, and then you said earlier, like, children, I notice at this age, they forget stuff. Okay. So if you know that they're forgetting stuff, then practice not taking it personally. Understand that they're going to forget. Understand that you are going to repeat yourself a couple of different times. And before you hit that limit of getting so fed up from repeating, ask yourself, okay, what are some consequences that I'm going to put into place so that I don't blow my lid, I don't lose my self regulation. They're clear on the boundaries, they're clear on the expectations, and these are the things that are going to happen. It just makes it makes it cleaner. And then there's clarity. Because sometimes if we're having a good day, we're not going to trip off of certain things. But if
mm-hmm.
we're having a bad day, everything they do is wrong. So from their perspective, they don't know what they're getting. They don't know what kind of day you have. They don't know about, and I don't want my child to know about bills. I don't want my child to know about my life stresses. They're children. They're going to get that. So they don't need to carry that. So, but if you're clear, like, hey, I asked you to take out the recycling. It's my third time telling you, and then have something in place for, okay, so this is what happens when you don't do it. Or ask questions. Why didn't you? Why do you think you're forgetting? How's your nutrition? How's your child's nutrition? Are they drinking water? Are they eating stuff? Are they getting enough sleep? All these things impact your memory. They impact your focus. And so a lot of times when our children don't do things or rise to a certain occasion that we want, we take it personally. And that's when we get angry. And it's never personal. Our children are not out to get us. They're not.
Oh my God, I love that.
They rely on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They know that, which is why they adjust themselves if they feel like they're surviving too. If they feel like they know that we're not going to throw them out on the street, but sometimes they don't know that.
Well, I mean, I hope not.
I hope
But
not,
what I'm
but
hearing too, Ayanna, is like there's a lot of self-reflection in this and in these years. And just going back to what you're saying is trying to separate yourself and not taking it personally, which I mean, that's a lot easier said
it's
than
easier
done
said than done.
sometimes,
Sure, sure.
but just keeping that top of mind can go a long way. One thing also that you said was just talking about connection and just getting that connection. Some kids are just really resistant to connection at that age, so is there any advice to break through, to really,
Yeah.
and maybe part of it is just keep trying. And so I'm sure there's some of that, but for some of the kids who are at an age or just as their personality that they're a little bit more resistant to that connection that for his parent, I mean, that's so important. What would you suggest?
Well, number one, you want to ask yourself, why are they resistant? And be honest with yourself. And you said it too, and I know that. I mean, I could tell you all that. I still take things personally. So it's not, one of the things that has really been on my side is practice and grace. Giving myself grace, self-forgiveness, huge. It allows me to be forgiving to my children. It allows them to be forgiving to me because again, I'm modeling all of this. But if you feel like, you're trying, you want to make time with your child and they're just not interested, I'm willing to bet that the reason why they're not interested is because they do not feel seen.
Mm.
If you don't feel seen by a person, you do not want to hang out with them. If you guys are about to do something and you're like, yeah, we're going to go and, we're going to go to the movies and then, we're going to have this special time together, right? But then from the moment that you guys are getting dressed to leave the house, everything is, well, why don't you do it that way? Or maybe we should do it this way, or I don't like what you're wearing, take that off. Or if there's a lot of judgment involved or what seems to be judgment, which again requires you to be honest with yourself, like
Hmm.
empathy. Like imagine if someone was talking to you like this, would you want to hang out with them? No.
No.
So the resistance,
Right.
so ask questions is another thing. Practice self-forgiveness and questions. Get curious. Why is it that my child does not want to hang out with me? Because I've noticed that, there are times when teenagers, they're in a space where they do just want to be alone. And there's really nothing you can do about that.
Well,
They
but
just
so
want
do
to be
we as
alone.
adults too, though, right?
Exactly.
So
And we
it's
need that.
totally normal. Yeah.
And not only is it normal, it's necessary. We need that. So we need to be okay. We need to be okay with them wanting to have time to themselves. And if we're not okay with that, then we need to dig into why we're not okay with that. Why are we taking that personally? Why do we feel like we need to be, up under them? Because a lot of times too, that displays to them that we don't trust them. And then that makes them not trust themselves. And so that's a whole nother conversation.
Mm.
But, for the children that are resistant or they're just like, I don't really want to hang out, 9 times out of 10 is because you're not just letting them be when they're with you. You gotta just let them be. You can think what you're thinking. I mean, trust me, there are things that are said, and I'm like, my head is like alert, alert, alert. But my response, I'm taking my deep breaths. I'm seeing her for who she is. And I'm just with her. I'm letting her be her because there will be an opportunity for me to give advice. There will be, and she's going to be receptive to that because I'm not giving it to her. I'm not bombarding her. And I've had to work on that because I'm a talker. And I've asked her for feedback. I'm like, I ask my children for feedback. So that's huge.
Oh, I
How am I
like that.
doing?
So, like, asking for feedback on in how you're doing as a
Yes.
parent. Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
I've asked my older child, what do you see that I'm doing with the younger one? What could I be doing better with her that you didn't maybe get when you were that age? Just the other day, I went on a walk with my teen, and I, asked her, hey, if you were to grade me, what kind of grade would I get? And she gave me a grade, and I said, okay, how can I? Okay, so I'll just be transparent. She gave
Yeah.
me a
Let's
B
see.
minus.
What is it?
She gave me a B minus.
B minus. Oh my
She gave me a B
goodness. See,
minus, and I said, "Really, a B minus?" And she goes,
wow.
"Yeah." But mind you, this was after the phone conversation because I had said, I think we should start fasting from the phone. I think, we should kind of take a break. So she didn't like
Mm,
that conversation. So I think that
hmm
was what that grade was
mm.
about. But I asked her, I said, "Okay, well, what can I do to get that to a B?" And so she told me, and I said, "I want you to be completely honest with me." And I have these conversations not every day. I really work on, and I do it in a time when I'm not self-conscious or defensive. I'm just listening because
Mm.
she's going to have her opinions. Of course, she's a child. Of course, she wants to be on her phone 24 hours a day. Of course, she does. And I, as a mother, am not going to let that happen. So, of course, she's not going to be happy with that. So, I don't need an A. But how do I get, and a lot of this is, yes, this is me asking for feedback from her for me to be better, but it's also for her to be thoughtful and her to practice empathy on what my position is like as a mother. What would she do if she was a mother? What would she do as a child? You know what I mean? So a lot of these are questions that are important to ask. And when you ask and you actually listen, then your children are more receptive to be around you.
I love that idea. And not that I don't talk to my kids about it, but just so blatantly, like, give me a grade. Like, where are we? Like, I think that is so powerful. And again, it gives them a voice in the conversation and their opinion is heard. But, to your point, I can also see it. Timing is everything. And if you've had a
Everything.
bad day, if you're feeling a little short tempered, maybe that's not the time for the conversation. But, on a drive, taking a walk, it goes back to being open to self reflection and taking that feedback and not taking it personally,
And also making sure that, yes, that you're in a space to receive the feedback, but also checking in with them first to see how their day went.
Yeah.
If they're up for a conversation, they may not be up for it. So they might rip you apart because they had a day. And you don't want that. You want to have so a lot in creating space to listen, be there, and then start asking the questions to the things that get them to really think.
These
Being
are
outside is really critical. You have air, you have, space, nature, you're not really distracted, things like that.
being outside is critical to those conversations. That's great. That's a pro tip right there. I think ultimately, as we're talking about, this is all normal. It is all natural. It is a good thing that our kids are moving from tween to teen, and ultimately, like, it's. I think for us parents, it's just acknowledging it's okay to have a little sadness tied to, like, your 12-year-old might not grab your hand anymore. And that is sad. Like, that hurts a little bit, but it is part of life. And just in embracing that next phase of the relationship, which it's different, but it can also be good.
Oh, absolutely. So, one of the things that it's looking at all these different steps of grief, and the common steps of grief, they go from denial to anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance is usually the final stage of grief. And when you're thinking about it, when you're thinking about your child, you you could think about like denial as being, I can't believe they said that. I
Hmm.
can't believe they did that. That's not who you are. You know better. It's like they've never been in this age before, so maybe they don't know. And one important thing too, scientifically, is that the stages of moving from infancy to toddlerhood, the brain development is massive during that age. It's the same level of and speed of growth from childhood to teenagehood in terms of
Oh,
brain development.
interesting.
So you'll notice that how 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, they have meltdowns, things like that. Teenagers do too.
I have
Adults do
experienced
too. In
that. Yes.
all honesty,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
but
I'm
teenagers
well
do
aware.
too.
Yeah.
But the struggle with that as parents is that we think that because they look older and they've been around for some time, that they know better and they're not going to have these meltdowns and they're not going to have these struggles that they did when they were 2 and 3. And of course the meltdowns look different. It might be more lip, or what we would define as disrespectful, talk back
Hmm.
or whatever. It may not be crying out on the store floor, but it's very similar. So anyway, we're setting these expectations up for them, not acknowledging their journey and their growing process, and not meeting them where they are. We're in denial, and we're like, no, 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 you're still, and then we get angry. They're angry, now we're angry, right? Or we're angry and then we're just taking things out on them. We're, and then the bargaining is like, okay, I see that things are changing. What can I do to preserve this child's, like, what can I do? And so we start compromising our own self and our own beliefs on parenting just to try to see what we can hold on to. Sometimes there's some depression in there, depends on what that looks like. Sometimes there's some symptoms of sadness, as you said. And all of that it's such a part of life. And when we take, when we look at pain from a bigger vision view, it's such a way for us to grow from life, that pain is so necessary. Of course, it doesn't feel good. It's not supposed to. But once we get to the level of acceptance, we actually can see the fun things that we can do with our teens. We actually can revel in how they're growing.
Yeah.
We can see, like, I really thought my daughter graduated from middle school yesterday, and I thought I was gonna cry. I didn't cry, but I thought I was gonna cry. And really what I found myself doing once I was able to like sit down and rest and I just marveled at her. She's a
Hmm.
young woman
Yeah.
and she is thriving in areas of her life that I've prayed for. And I'm so grateful. And I can take some of that credit because I've been intentional, but that's her. That's her
Mm.
drive. That's what she wants to do. And I've given her space to do that. And so watching her grow into a young woman is exciting for me because I've accepted that she's no longer 5, 6, 7. That time is gone. And honestly, it helps me to appreciate, my younger daughter because
Mm.
I know that that time's not going to last that much longer.
Oh my gosh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, you really embrace, so to speak, or you just hold on to those cuddles and the sweetness and the little pictures that they draw, because it is all so short-lived in the
Yeah,
big picture in the scheme of things. My
yeah.
oldest is 16, and it makes me a little emotional hearing you talk about your daughter and thinking of mine going off to college in, just a couple of years. So we're all trying to figure it out.
We're trying
Ayana,
to
if
figure it out. Yeah.
yeah, if there was one piece of advice or like just a key takeaway for parents today when it comes to this, what would that be?
The biggest thing that has worked for me and my clients is whatever it is that you want to see in your child, exercise it within yourself
Mm,
first, whatever it is. You don't want them to be on their phone all the time? Put your phone down. You don't want them to eat all the stuff? Stop eating all the stuff. Even when they're
mm,
asleep, I used to sneak food,
mm,
when my kids were asleep. I'm like, okay, now I could eat all the things. Okay. Worry about yourself. That's like
yeah.
the biggest thing because they're watching consciously and subconsciously. They're picking up habits every day. And the best thing that you can do for your children is to take care of yourself. The things that you want from them, make sure that you're at least practicing to rise to that occasion. You're not always going to get it. So, you got to forgive yourself. So, practice self forgiveness, patience, more practice.
Practice makes progress. I don't think we're all
Yeah,
anybody's going to
that's
get it
right.
perfect, but it does make
No, it does.
progress.
I say that
Yeah.
all the time. It makes progress.
Yeah.
And, one other, I just had a thought and I lost it, but it was so juicy and I don't remember what it
Well,
was.
if you think about it, you let us know and we'll include it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Ayanna, thank you so much. I love this conversation. It just so much good advice. I really appreciate you and your time. And I also want to let our listeners know we'll have more resources on this and a link to your website on
Yeah.
wgme.com/raising meat. Ayanna, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I
Love
did
it.
actually remember the thought
What
and
is
I
it?
would love it. Sorry, I would
No,
love it
no.
if you
Go, go,
included
go.
in
What is
that.
it?
Um, Giving heartfelt apologies to your children is golden.
Oh, yes.
It's golden. If you mess up, repair. Don't go into what they did that was wrong. You take your ownership. And I guarantee they will start to take their ownership as well. If you're like consistent with it, so that's big. That's what I wanted to say.
I love what a way to end it. That is so important. Ayanna, thank you so much. We'll talk
Thanks for
to you
having me.
again.
Yes, love it. Take care.
A lot of things hit me in this conversation with Ayanna, and a couple in particular really stood out. First, if you felt off or disconnected from your teen or tween and just maybe even a little sad, you're not alone. This is a very real thing to mourn that relationship that once was. And, maybe you hadn't put words to it or identified it either. So we can lean into that and eventually, hopefully, come to acceptance. I also love that idea of just really making an effort to embrace that new phase of the relationship and the fun and the different things that we can do together with the older kids. Another hard truth, think about how you react and interact with your teen and tween on a regular basis. Do you have times where you feel like every interaction is about asking, but really telling them what to do? I mean, raising my hand, I'm guilty there. I don't like that feeling that I'm constantly asking or even correcting, but taking that time to really stop and think about how that must feel from their perspective, it's probably even worse. So, let's be real. There are going to be plenty of times that calling them out and, sometimes even hounding, it's a necessary evil, but holy cow, just to be aware of it, hear yourself, check in with them, and are there some things that you can, kind of just let go of, having that big picture of your relationship with them in mind. And finally, the self-reflecting part. Are we after our kids on things that we feel self-conscious about with ourselves and wanting them to do better than us? My guess is if we're really honest about that with ourselves, the answer is yes. So being aware of that is key, and giving ourselves and our kids a little grace, all to help stay better connected at every age. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of this conversation on Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, consider a positive rating and review as well so others can find this message. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.